She was standing in the open, data core in both hands. Safe zone 20 meters behind her. The exercise horn hadn't sounded yet, but it was already over. In every way that mattered. As she knew it, she wasn't moving. Tour VN Call stood 12 meters away with his weapon half-raised. Around him, the remnants of four squads that had been, until 4 minutes ago, the best tactical cohort DROVAS station and fielded in a decade. They weren't looking at each other. They were looking at her. The confusion was gone from her face. Not gradually, not in pieces. It had dropped all at once, like something set down after a very long walk. And what was underneath it was older than anything Ben O'Sharth had expected to see on a first-year student. Her eyes were still. Her breathing was slow. When she spoke, her voice carried none of the uncertain lilt he had spent for months cataloging. "You should have won," she said. Tour VN Call said nothing. His upper lip had gone rigid. "Your formation was correct. Your timing was correct. Your communication protocols were excellent." I paused, not hesitation. Something more deliberate, like a scalpel being set down between cuts. "But you planned for the version of me you thought I was." Silence across sublevel 9. Then the smile came back. Sought, slightly tilted. The corners of her eyes creased with something that looked, from the observation tower, genuinely like warmth. "Anyway, does anyone know if the cafeteria does that warm grain thing on Wednesdays? I've been thinking about it for like an hour." In the observation tower, O'Sharth realized his secondary eyelids had been half closed for 6 minutes. He had not noticed until now. "The part that still keeps me awake isn't what she did. It's how long she let me be wrong about her. Stay close because she did it on purpose." 6 months before the exercise, O'Sharth had been exactly the kind of evaluator he believed himself to be: thorough, impartial, 19 cycles of species assessment behind him, with a record of placement decisions he had never once been asked to revisit. He had evaluated the carrot high prodigy who solved stellar navigation problems in half-sleep. He had examined Omni or I pair, who communicated faster in silence than most species managed with speech. He had spent 3 weeks with the Vex Ari collective that distributed a single consciousness across 11 linked bodies, each one processing a different data stream, all of them arriving at the same conclusion simultaneously. He had, in short, seen excellence. What he had not seen, what he had never been asked to account for, was a human doing anything worth watching twice. DROVAS station's enrollment records reflected this plainly. In 30 years of humanity's membership in the Galactic Collegiate Assembly, exactly for humans had earned placement in the Advanced Tactical Theory program. 3 had washed out before the 2nd semester. The 4th was sitting in the back row of his classroom right now, biting the inside of her cheek and copying notes left-handed into a battered notebook with a burned circle on the cover. Ranked 26th out of 30 enrolled students, having just asked, in front of the entire cohort, whether controlling the tempo of engagement meant like being the one who decides when things get fast. Tour VN Call had tapped his cranial ridge twice. 3 other students had stopped writing. O'Sharth had answered without looking up from his display. He had not at that point, opened the classified footage file sitting in his priority queue. It had been there for 3 days, flagged urgent, tagged for academic review, accompanied by 11 messages from Commander Cale Stross, whose patience O'Sharth had, apparently, exhausted. He had better things to do. He had always had better things to do than watch a human fumble through basic tactical concepts on camera and then be told, in the kind of tone reserved for developmental species, that they had shown real promise. He opened it on the 4th day, after the lecture where she asked about supply line logistics in a way that suggested she had never encountered the concept of distance. The footage file was labeled DEMI, RIDINRESCARCIDNNX, INCIDENTRESPONSCCCLASSIFIED, EWA, UTHORIZED. He watched it once. Then he watched it again. Then he sat in his archive office, which smelled of preserved parchment from 7 dead civilizations, and stared at the far wall for a length of time he declined to measure. The recording began with static, helmet cam footage. Ushraini, first-person perspective Commander Stross's unit, arriving at the Meridian Research in X 6 months prior, having been dispatched in response to a VRETH syndicate trade that was supposed to have been routine. The VRETH were not Galactic Assembly. They were what the Assembly politely called non-official opportunists and what everyone else called raiders. Hit-and-run specialists. They had hit Meridian hard. The NX's security team had lasted for minutes. When Stross's unit arrived, 14 VRETH operatives were fortified in the research wing with 11 civilian scientists. The VRETH commander, a scarred veteran called Siroth Velayan, had 23 successful raids on his record and had never, in the course of those 23 operations, lost a single hostage because he was meticulous about making it clear, early, that losing one would not cost him anything he couldn't replace. We have 14 hostiles, heavily armed, holding the research wing, Strauss's voice said on the recording. Osharth had listened to it 3 times now, and it still sounded ragged. 11 hostages, all civilian researchers. We are outgunned, outpositioned, and I have maybe 20 minutes before they execute everyone and blow the facility. I need options. A pause on the recording. 5 seconds, maybe 6. Then a voice Osharth recognized immediately. Khan, almost bored. The specific boredom of someone who has been asked a question they already know the answer to and is waiting for the room to catch up. Commander, this is Specialist DAVM. I can get them out. Strauss's response had the texture of a man who couldn't decide whether to laugh. DAVM, you're a student observer. You're not even supposed to be on this deployment. With respect, sir, you said you need adoptions. I said I need adoptions from people with actual combat experience. Not, I can extract all 11 hostages and neutralize the hostile force. Her voice did not rise. Minimal casualties. Possibly 0. If I time the entry correctly. I'm informing you that I'm going in. If you want to help, create a diversion at the North Service entrance in 4 minutes. If not, stay clear of the East Corridor. Strauss had started to respond. The camera had already shifted. What Osharth watched next, on the external surveillance feeds that Strauss's unit had pulled from the NX's own network, he forced himself to review at half speed the second time through, because at normal speed his mind kept refusing to process it as a single continuous action. Sierra Day VN moved through the Meridian Research NX the way water moves through a cracked hull, not fast. Exactly, but finding every gap before it fully existed. She had acquired a plasma rifle from somewhere, a fallen guard most likely, and she held it with the kind of ease that was not practiced ease but older ease. The ease of something that had long since stopped being conscious of itself. The first VRETH operative never heard her. He dropped with a single shot to the weapon arm, and she was already closing the distance, and the nerve strike to his neck that rendered him unconscious was delivered before he had finished falling. Non-lethal. Efficient. No wasted motion. The second and third were together. They were watching the corridor, which was the right thing to do. The tactically sound thing. It didn't matter at all. She threw something small. Osharth had to pause the footage to identify it as a light scatter device pulled from a maintenance panel, and in the half-second, they turned to track the movement. She was behind them. One disarmed, the other stunned with his own weapon. Both down before the light scatter finished dispersing. For seconds, Osharth had watched that segment 7 times. It was still for seconds. She was moving again before the second operative's knees touched the floor, flowing toward the research wing. Using the NX's own architecture as a system, a corner became concealment. A broken ceiling panel became a sightline blocker. A stretch of corridor where the lights had failed became 30 meters she covered at full speed while being functionally invisible to anyone depending on standard optics. She had not run a single step that didn't serve her purpose. When she reached the research wing's outer corridor, 5 VRETH operatives remained inside with the 11 researchers. All 5 had direct lines of fire on the hostages. There was no angle of approach. There was no position from which a single operative could engage 5 armed hostiles simultaneously without the researchers being caught between them. Osharth had paused the footage there, the first time through, and run the geometry himself. He was an evaluator with 19 cycles of tactical theory assessment behind him. He had understood immediately that what the recording was about to show him should not be possible. She knocked on the door, not breached it, not forced it, not. And when the door opened, because Siroth Vala 23 successful raids behind him, was apparently curious enough to want to see what was knocking on his door in the middle of an active hostage situation, Sierra DAVM looked at the weapon pointed at her face and said, in the exact same tone she used to ask about tactical tempo in his classroom, "Oh, Harry, I think I'm really turned around. Is this the emergency exit?" Siroth Vala looked at her for 3 full seconds. Osharth had timed it. "You're military," Valayan said. His voice carried the particular flatness of a man who had lived long enough to smell threat before it moved. "I can always tell." "Eh?" She laughed. It sounded genuine. It sounded confused. It sounded like a student who had got unseparated from a tour group during the worst possible field trip. No, the whole shooting thing was very scary. Honestly, you guys are really good at that. She gestured vaguely. The terrorism. She was still talking. Her eyes were not. Sharth had watched her eyes at half speed. Frame by frame, they were moving in a pattern he recognized from tactical assessment literature as sweep and grid calculation. Distance and angle, adjusted for obstacle interference, updated every 2 seconds as the researchers shifted position. She was running the room. She had been running it since the door opened, and every word coming out of her mouth was buying her another 2-second update cycle. Vela N raised the weapon higher. You think I'm stupid? Human? Oh, gosh. No, you seem really smart. Very intimidating. She moved. Sharth had watched the next 24 seconds 11 times across 2 viewing sessions, and he was still not entirely certain he was reading the sequence correctly. She had used the detached ceiling panel, which had been hanging by a wire 3 meters to her left, which she had noted on her second grid sweep and which no one else in the room had thought about at all as a half-second ballistic shield. In that half-second, she had fired twice, once at the support mounts of the heavy storage rack behind the VRETH formation, and once upward, at a 40-degree angle, toward the ceiling above the researchers. The concussive charge detonated above the hostages' heads, loud, disorienting, harmless, at that angle, to anyone below it. The storage rack collapsed. 5 VRETH operatives were blind, pinned, and breathing dust. Sierra DAVN had moved through them in 24 seconds. Non-lethal. Fire. Not because she couldn't have done otherwise, but because she had apparently decided, before she knocked on the door, that she didn't need to. When it was over, she helped the researchers to their feet. She checked each one for injuries with quick, practiced efficiency. She made a comment about definitely having missed the bathroom. When Strauss's unit finally breached the facility, she was leaning against the wall with her weapon slung and an expression of mild relief. Oh good, she said. You're here. I think those soldiers took care of the bad guys. They went that way. Strauss had looked at her for a long time. Specialist DAVN. He said, what exactly did you before you enrolled at the academy? She shrugged. Stuff. Boring human stuff. Nothing interesting. Sharth stopped the recording. He sat with his 3 eyes and focused in the archive office's recycled air cycling quietly around him and the smell of 7 dead civilizations worth of preserved knowledge filling his respiratory vents. Outside his window, the gas giant storms moved in their slow, enormous spirals, orange and copper in the deep arterial reed. The same storms that had been turning for 6,000 years before Deir Ovas Station had been built here, and that would be turning 6,000 years after it was gone. He accessed Sierra DN's military file. It took him 4 hours to clear the necessary permissions. The first 3 clearance requests returned a single word, RESTRI. C. The 4th returned everything. Her name was Sierra DAVN and she was 28 years old and she had been active with Earth Special Operations Command for 9 continuous years without a single deployment gap long enough to qualify as leave. The commendation list ran to 11 pages. 11 solo extraction operations. 37 high-value neutralization S. A service citation from a conflict that, according to the Galactic Assembly's official records, had never happened. She had been at the Titan rebellions, the Martian blockade, the Europa incident, which the Assembly still classified as an industrial accident. She had skills and training that most species would require cybernetic enhancement to replicate, and she was ranked 26th in his advanced tactical theory course. And she had been sitting in his back row for 4 months asking questions about supply line logistics. A note at the bottom of the file, appended by Admiral Y.S. Centaur Kev Earth Strategic Command. Read, Series 1 of ours, has been for 9 years. She won't take leave, we've tried. Enrolling her in the academy as a regular student was the compromise. She thinks she's there to rest and maybe learn something new. Don't tell her that we know she's incapable of being bad at anything. Let her have this. She earned it. Sharth read it twice. Then he filed it, and did not sleep. And in the morning he sent a message to Commander Strauss that said only I watched the footage. What do you need? Strauss's reply arrived before Sharth had finished his first meal of the day. Short, direct, the message of a man who had learned, somewhere in 31 years of command, that long explanations were a form of asking permission. Joint training exercise. 2. Live ammunition scenarios. Command staff observing. Put DAV on a team and push them into a crisis. I need to see what she does when hiding stops being an option. Ewan? Osharth had stared at the message for a long time. He typed back, "This seems manipulative." Stross replied in under a minute. "It is. But she's too good to waste and too stubborn to admit she's bored. Sometimes you have to force people to accept their own potential." Ewan? Osharth thought about the 24 seconds in the Meridian Research in X. He thought about 11 researchers going home to their families because a first-year student had knocked on a door and done something his tactical theory curriculum did not have a category for. He thought about Sierra Day in the back row, biting the inside of her cheek, writing left-handed in a notebook with a burned circle on the cover. "I'm in," he sent back. 2 weeks. He spent those 2 weeks designing a team configuration that a reasonable person would call cruel. Jan SK or VUR, B or Van I. Enormous, capable of generating more physical force than anyone else in the cohort. Tactically inflexible in direct proportion to how dominant he believed his position to be. Give him a clear corridor and he was unstoppable. Give him a problem that required patience and he became an obstacle to himself. Tip VA, R. Allen. Thexori, the fastest systems intrusion specialist Osharth had evaluated in 6 cycles, whose cranial antennae flushed deep orange at the sound of live fire and who had, in 3 separate simulation exercises, frozen completely at the critical moment and required a teammate to physically redirect her attention. LRE of an N. DREH. Exceptional spatial awareness. Sensory tendrils calibrated to detect movement through 3 layers of structural material. And a deference instinct so deeply embedded in her culture's scout caste traditions that she had never, in 4 months of coursework, acted on a correct observation without first waiting for someone else to authorize it. And Sarah DAVN, ranked 26th, who asked slow questions and wrote in a notebook and bit her cheek. He submitted the team assignments on a Wednesday. The exercise was scheduled for the following Thursday. It dawned her, when the triple suns of D Aerovastation system would cast shadows in 3 different directions and make depth perception, for species that relied on it, genuinely difficult. To her VN call, naturally, drew the 3 strongest remaining students. Osharth had not arranged this. He hadn't needed to. The night before the exercise, Osharth sat in his archive office and reviewed the tactical training records of every student in the cohort. He had done this before. He did it once a week. On average, as a matter of professional habit, the numbers were familiar. He knew where each student ranked, and why, and what their failure patterns looked like, and what kind of pressure would expose those patterns most efficiently. What he kept returning to was a single line in Sirad Hubbard 26th out of 30. Consistent, never failing outright, never excelling. The median, held with extraordinary precision, across every assessment category. The median was not an accident. He understood that now. Holding exactly the median required more awareness than excelling did. You had to know where the line was, which meant you had to be capable of finding it from above. He closed the file and went to bed and did not, for the second time in 2 weeks, sleep particularly well. Dawn came with pale light that fractured wrong. Osharth stood in the observation tower with 3 other instructors and watched the cohort assemble on the exercise floor below. 28 students, 7 4-person squads. The gas giant's storm light falling sideways through the tower's reinforced windows in long copper bands. The sub-level 9 tactical range smelled of recycled air and the particular metallic sharpness of charged weapons on standby. Tour VN call squad moved into position first. Crisp, coordinated. He gave 3 hand signals in sequence and they spread into a standard assessment formation without any of them speaking. Blue squad assembled with somewhat less elegance. Jan SK crossed his arms and looked at the facility schematics on his data pad with the expression of a being who had already decided that looking at the schematics was less important than being the largest person on the team. LRA stood slightly apart, her sensory tendrils doing slow, precise sweeps of the exercise space, noticing things she was almost certainly not going to mention without being asked. Tip's antennae were already a pale, anxious amber. Sarah DAVN was studying her own data pad with her head tilted at a slight angle, the way she always tilted her head when she was performing the activity of not understanding something. "So," she said, without looking up, "what's the plan?" Jan SK didn't bother hiding his expression. "The plan is I go in first, break what needs breaking, and you 3 keep up. Stay behind me. Don't get in my way." "Oh, okay." She nodded. "That sounds good." You seem really strong and stuff. LRA closed her eyes briefly. There. For a DREDH, was the equivalent of a long exhale. The exercise horn sounded. What followed, for the first 18 minutes, was a fairly accurate depiction of what O'Sharth had designed it to be, a controlled disaster. Jan SK charged ahead of his team's coordination. Wyson had to reverse both times when he found himself unsupported. LRA tracked 3 separate enemy movements with perfect accuracy and reported none of them until Pip asked her directly what she was sensing. Pip froze for 6 seconds when Yellow Squad opened fire from 200 meters out, which was 6 seconds during which their left flank was entirely open. Sierra wondered. There was no better word for it. She moved with her team but slightly behind them, slightly off the line, occasionally stopping to look at something that wasn't obviously relevant. At one point she crouched near a drainage grate and stayed there for almost 40 seconds while Janeske, 30 meters ahead, was actively shouting at LRE about angles of approach. The instructor beside O'Sharth made a quiet sound of second-hand embarrassment. By the 18-minute mark, Blue Squad was pinned behind a collapsed partition wall with Yellow Squad holding the corridor to their east and Reed Squad to our VN Call Squad having already secured 2 of the 3 approach vectors to the date or facility. The exercise, by any conventional assessment, was over. Jan SK was loudly explaining this to the rest of his team. Sierra was sitting with her back against the partition wall, turning her data pad over in her hands, looking at the ceiling with an expression of mild, slightly distracted thought. Jan SK said, then corrected himself with a B or Van I throat click that translated roughly as the human whose name I keep mispronouncing. Davy M. Are you paying attention? We're losing. Oh? She looked at him. Are we? That's too bad. Too bad. He stared at her. We're trapped. Outpositioned. And you're looking at the ceiling. I was looking at the drainage system. Actually, she glanced back up. The pipes run east-west under the floor. There's a junction about 15 meters that way. She pointed through the partition wall, which was to say, in the direction of Yellow Squad's position. Tip could fit through it. Probably. Silence. Tip's antennae shifted from amber toward something approaching white. Also, Sarah continued, in the same tone she used to propose that maybe tactical advantage had something to do with positioning. Yellow Squad reloads on a staggered cycle. 46 seconds average. Left flank runs 3 seconds behind right, which means there's a window where the east corridor has reduced coverage. She paused, and Red Squad is about to flank Yellow from the north. They're not encrypting their channel. They've been planning it for the last 8 minutes. The 4 of them looked at her. Jan SK's thorax plates shifted. The B or Van I equivalent of a jaw dropping. You've been listening to Reed Squad's communications. His voice had gone very flat. This entire time. They weren't secured. She looked genuinely puzzled by the implication. I wasn't really hacking. I was just listening, which is different. That is not different. TAVN. She considered this. Well, anyway, Red Squad's flanking move is going to create about 40 seconds of disorientation across Yellow's formation. If we time it correctly, we can use that window to move through the east corridor to the date a core facility while they're dealing with each other. She stood up, brushing dust from her uniform. Do you want to try that? Or do you want to keep doing the hiding plan? I'm fine either way. In the observation tower, O'Sharth became aware that Commander Strauss had moved, very quietly, to stand directly beside him. Hello? Jan SK was looking at Sierra DAV on the way. O'Sharth imagined. The Meridian Research and X's security team had looked at the aftermath of her work with the specific expression of someone trying to reconcile two completely different versions of recent events. Fine. Jan SK said finally. We do it your way. What do you need from us? She picked up her rifle, checked the charge, slung it. Just stay here and look pinned. I'll go get the data core and bring it back. They pause. Should take about 10 minutes. 12 if I get distracted by something interesting. By yourself. LRA's sensory tendrils had gone still. There are 3 squads between us and the objective. They're all focused on each other. They won't really be looking for one person moving slowly. She rolled her shoulders. Unless you want to come, I can wait. No one moved. Sierra DAVN walked out from behind the partition wall and into the open exercise floor. And O'Sharth's secondary eyelids began their slow, involuntary drift. She did not run. He had expected, somewhere in the back of his professional assessment brain, that removing the pretense of confusion would produce speed, that the performance had been the constraint and the reality beneath it would be explosive. kinetic, visible in the way that genuine excellence always made itself visible. Instead she walked, but the walk was different. Where before she had moved with the slightly unfocused drift of someone navigating an environment they didn't fully understand. Now she moved in the spaces between attention. When Yellow Squad's East operative turned left, she had already passed through his right peripheral arc. When Red Squad's advance created a noise signature from the north, she was already using it as cover, stepping into the sound's shadow, borrowing its distraction without adding to it. She read the exercise floor the way OSHAR 3'd assessment date, and not as a series of individual points, but as a system. Interconnected, each element informing every other, the whole more legible than any single part. She reached the drainage junction exactly where she pointed, went flattened through it in a movement that lasted for seconds, emerged 20 meters behind Yellow Squad's position, crouched, checked the reload cycle with a glance, and waited. Across the exercise floor, Red Squad hit Yellow Squad's north flank. The choreography of Yellow's disorientation, 3 operatives pivoting north, their east coverage contracting for exactly 38 seconds, was visible from the observation tower as a clear geometric gap. Sierra was already moving through it. Strauss exhaled slowly beside O'Sharth. Not a sound of surprise, something more like recognition. The data core facility was held by Green Squad for students in an overlapping defensive configuration that the tactical theory curriculum described as close to impenetrable for a single operative incursion. O'Sharth had written that section of the curriculum himself, 3 years ago, and he stood by it in general terms. The configuration assumed the incursion operative would attempt a direct approach. Sierra pulled out her data pad and typed for 30 seconds. The facility's internal lights began cycling irregularly. The automated defense system, which operated on a separate network from the main exercise controls, started running pattern check rotations that served no tactical purpose but required the system's full processing attention. The doors locked. Green Squad, inside the facility, had just been sealed into their own impenetrable position. One of the instructors beside O'Sharth said something in his native language that O'Sharth didn't catch but understood contextually. Sierra knocked on the door. She waved at the camera. "Hi," she said, through the open comms channel that everyone on the exercise floor could hear. "Green Squad, I'm really sorry about this. I need the data core. If you could maybe slide it under the door gap, that would be amazing. I promise it won't count against your assessment." From inside the facility, a student named Vera Th. Koss, who had the second highest tactical theory score in the cohort, said absolutely not. "Okay, that's fair." She attached a small device to the door panel. "This is a secondary lock override. Takes about 4 minutes. You'll be out well before the exercise ends. You guys did excellent defensive positioning. By the way, really? The overlapping fields of Fireword X-Book." A pause from inside. "Thank you," Barrett Th. Koss said. "You're welcome." The device beeped. The secondary lock disengaged with a soft click. Sierra opened the door just wide enough, reached in for the data core with one arm while keeping her body outside the firing line, and pulled it out. "Thanks so much. Good luck with the rest." She closed the door. She started jogging back toward the Blue Squad position. Red Squad spotted her at 20 meters. To her VN call's voice was sharpened immediate contact. Single target with the objective. All units, converge. What followed was, from the observation tower's perspective, a demonstration of the gap between excellent and singular. Her VN squad was excellent. They moved to cut off her exit vectors with precise coordination, collapsing the available space in a textbook envelopment pattern, driving her toward a position where she would have no choice but to stop or be eliminated. Their timing was correct. Their angles were correct. Their communication was efficient, unambiguous. Sierra threw the data core straight up. High arc, clean trajectory. It would come down in 8 to 9 seconds. In those 8 seconds, she went through to her VN squad like a translation error, like something the tactical exercise software hadn't been programmed to anticipate. The first shot he fired hit empty air. The second hit empty air. She had used a supply crate as a platform and vaulted over the squad's interior angle, not around it. Threw it, and when his third teammate tried to account for her trajectory, she changed direction in mid-movement in a way that required either cybernetic enhancement or 9 years of training that had overwritten whatever physical defaults she had started with. She landed, rolled, came upright directly under the falling data core, caught it without looking at it, was already moving before her feet fully settled. She could have been at the safe zone in 12 seconds. She stopped, Osharth's secondary eyelids were fully closed. He did not open them. He watched through them, the way Carrot High learned to in early childhood. The translucent membranes offering light but not blocking it. And what he saw through it was Sierra Vien standing motionless in the open exercise floor with Tour Vien cult 12 meters away and the data core in both hands in the safe zone behind her. The confusion was gone from her face. He had seen that face for 4 months. He had thought he understood it. He had filed it under developmental species limited capacity and moved on to more interesting assessments. He saw now, with the particular clarity of someone who had been wrong for a very long time, that the face he had been looking at was never her face at all. What was underneath it was not frightening. That surprised him. It was tired. Profoundly. Specifically tired. In the way that someone becomes tired when they have been carrying something heavy for a long time and have gotten very good at not letting it show, and the not letting it show has itself become a weight added to the original weight. And all of it has been going on for 9 years. She looked at Tour Vien call, and she told him the one true thing. You planned for the version of me you thought I was. Tour Vien's upper lip was rigid. Around him, the remnants of 4 squads were very still. That's the only mistake you made, Sierra said. It's also the only one that matters. The silence across sublevel 9 had a texture to it. The kind that forms when a large number of beings simultaneously revise something they believed to be settled. Then she tilted her head. The corners of her eyes creased. Anyway, does anyone know if the cafeteria does that warm grain thing on Wednesdays? I've been thinking about it for like an hour. The exercise horn sounded. Tour Vien call set his weapon down. He did it carefully. The way you set something down when it has stopped doing what you expected it to do and you need a moment before you decide what that means. Stross turned to Osharth. Kenshilid? Osharth thought about what he had just watched. Not the tactics. Though the tactics were extraordinary. The tactics were the visible part. The part that could be measured and recorded and cited in assessment reports. What mattered was the invisible part, the 18 minutes of apparent uselessness during which she had mapped every reload cycle and drainage route and unencrypted communication channel on the exercise floor. The way she had told her team what she needed from them, which was nothing, and told them in a tone that made them feel useful rather than redundant. The way Jin SK had stopped arguing and Pip had stopped being afraid and Delray had stopped waiting for permission. Not because Sierra had ordered them to, but because watching her had made them believe, briefly, that the situation was more manageable than it appeared. She already did, Osharth said. Her team just doesn't know yet that she lead them. Stross was quiet for a moment. And if the galaxy needs her again? Osharth watched Sierra Vien walk toward her teammates. She bought Jan SK out of a supplier run bet she claimed to have made and mostly didn't remember. She asked Pip something in a low voice. Pip's antennae shifted from white back toward their resting amber. Slowly, like a temperature dropping to something livable. She said something to Delray that made Delray's tendrils curl inward. Briefly, in the DRETH gesture that indicated an emotion for which standard Galactic had no direct translation but which roughly meant recognized. Then she'll stop pretending, Osharth said. She told me as much. He found the note on his desk that evening. Paper, handwritten, in an age of digital communication. The physical objective it felt deliberate, like a choice made specifically because it couldn't be intercepted, archived, or forwarded without his knowledge. He read it once quickly, then again slowly, then once more with the kind of attention he reserved for documents he wanted to remember accurately. Adjudicator Osharth, thank you for a genuinely interesting exercise today. I learned things about team coordination I hadn't considered before. Also, I know you know what I am. I'm guessing Commander Stross does too. I'm not upset about it. You were both pretty subtle, relatively speaking. If it's possible, I would like to finish the semester as a regular student. I'll try harder in class. I'll ask fewer confusing questions. I'll aim for maybe 22nd in the rankings instead of 26th. But please don't make me be operational again yet. I've been operational for 9 years. I would very much like, for a little while, to just be a person sitting in the back row trying to figure out whether supply line logistics are actually interesting, or whether I'm just desperate for something to think about that isn't a threat assessment. If the galaxy genuinely needs me, I'll stop. I promise. Until then, can I just be Sierra, the slightly slow human who has a weird thing about notebooks? Thank you. I've read the doctrine it draws from. You updated it correctly in 3 places where the original was out of date. I thought you should know someone noticed. Osharth read it 3 times. Then he filed it in his personal archive. In the section he labeled assessments requiring revision. Then he sat for a while in the recycled air and the preserved parchment smell, and the gas giant's ancient storms turned in the window behind him. And he thought about what it cost to carry a thing for 9 years, and how most species never had to find out. In the morning, he added a new section to the advanced tactical theory curriculum. He titled it Displayed Performance versus Actual Capability, a Measurement Problem. He did not explain the addition to his colleagues. He updated the ranked cohort list and moved Sira Dabang from 26th to 22nd. He did not tell her he had done it. 3 days later, she shuffled into his classroom 4 minutes late, apologized in a tone that suggested the concept of time was something she found genuinely difficult, and took her seat in the back row. She raised her hand midway through his analysis of supply line interdiction. "Professor O'Sharth," she said, "when you say interdiction point, do you mean like the place where you stop the thing? Or is it more complicated than that?" 2 students suppressed laughter. 2 were Vien Ka, who had not laughed at Sira Dabang's questions in for days, studied the surface of his desk. O'Sharth answered the question. When he glanced toward the back row a few minutes later, she was writing in the battered notebook, left-handed, slowly, like someone committing a language to memory. The burned circle on the cover caught the storm light from the window and held it for a moment, small and dark, before she shifted, and it was gone. The notebook sat closed on her desk for the rest of the lecture. He did not look at it again. He already knew it was full.